Hey there, sports history fans. We've got some exciting news to share with you. 6 of our podcasts from the Sports History Network have made it to the final round of voting for the prestigious Sports Podcast Awards. Here are their shows and the categories. Historically Speaking Sports and This Day in Sports History are both competing for Best Sports Talk Podcast. No Nonsense Old School Weightlifting History is in the running for Best Fitness, Health, and Wellbeing Podcast. When Football Was Football is up for Best Sports Documentary Podcast. Wrestling with Heels On has entered the ring for Best Wrestling Podcast. And Shoulder Roll Virtual Boxing is fighting for the title for Best Combat Sports Podcast. Now, of course, we need your help to take home the championship for each of these awesome shows. All you gotta do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/vote. Cast your vote for your favorite shows, or better yet, all 6 of them. Again, every vote counts, and we gotta show the world how much sports history really matters. So thank you for your support and making Sports History Network the headquarters for sports yesteryear. But again, don't wait. You gotta go vote now. That's over at sportshistorynetwork.com/vote.
Hello, this is Ross Lilly from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Perhaps we could start off where we left the last time. Yep, you were talking about we left off last time. You were talking about the Ice Bowl, and you were talking about how some of the Green Bay Packers players were wearing brown gloves. If you could pick up.
Well, they were light brown.
Right.
Light brown. Yeah, it was like you could not tell unless you got up close to them that they were wearing gloves.
Right.
Yeah, but they were thin. They weren't. I don't even think they were. They might have been leather, or they might have been just some sort of a rubberized glove. It wasn't like fur lined or anything.
Right.
But anyway, they had on those, and then they had on something over there underneath their helmet. It looked like a little thin something. I don't think all of them did, but some of them did. I could see them.
Right.
And maybe that was some of the ones that were on the bench and weren't playing, but all the ones out playing, they did have turtlenecks, and we had nothing but a t-shirt underneath. Well, I take it back. We did have long held underwear.
Right.
So we had no t-shirt. We just had long held underwear, and that was it.
Right. So I remember the linebacker, Dave Robinson, so the Packers was telling that story, and he said Vince Lombardi didn't want them wearing gloves because, back at that time they didn't have gloves that were specifically made for football. So, same reason that you guys were told not to wear gloves in case of a fumble or interception. You had to handle the ball. They didn't want it to slip out. But Dave Robinson said he turned to his teammate Willie Davis and said, well, we'll get a hold of some brown gloves, and Vince Lombardi will never know the difference.
Well, he was not.
Yeah.
Didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Well, they still had him on at the end of the game.
Yeah. So I guess they were a little better prepared for the weather.
Well, I'm sure they were. They practiced it every day, and I mean, not every day, but every day. They had to go out and practice it. Lombardi, I know they didn't work out indoors.
Right.
But they were more acclimated, no question about it. We had never ever been in weather like that.
Right. So there's 2 games that I wanted to ask you about that the NFL did away with a long time ago. And I was talking about the playoff bowl game, and the other game is the college all-star game, which I believe you played in as a college all-star and then again as Super Bowl champion. And I happen to have a picture of one of those college all-star games.
I was in Chicago.
Yeah, that's that quarterback. Yep, that quarterback.
I think that was that Minnesota or
This is the college all-star game. They usually played it in Chicago. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we played the pros.
Well, and this one you were.
My senior year, they picked the pro. We played the winner of it. I think that was a bowl game, but it was a college versus pro. I don't remember exactly. I mean, I might be wrong about that too.
I think the Packers. I think when you were in college, the Packers were the NFL champions, and then
50. That was 1960. That was my last year.
yeah,
That's not the year we went though. Yeah, the All-Star. They picked
Right.
college All-Star. Yeah.
and then
And then we played another game in Chicago.
right,
That was kind of the opening game of the year.
right, and I think
I went to training camp in Thousand Oaks,
okay,
Chicago, and worked out 2 weeks. I mean, we had 2 weeks till the game. So we had 2 days up there as well as where I was. I'd been in 2 days, three weeks.
right. So this one, I think, this was after you guys beat the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. So that's you, and that's this quarterback went to the Packers. His name was Jerry Taggy.
I wonder if that was. I played in one All-Star game in Buffalo, and I can't remember. I don't remember exactly when that was.
Right.
That had to be 72, Mark.
72.
After they won the Super Bowl in 71.
Yes,
Right.
that was
the following summer then.
right. They usually played that. That was like the first preseason game. The NFL champions would play the college all-stars.
It was college All-Star, because I remember in
Yep.
Chicago we played in the college All-Star game, and but I played in a high school, college seniors against somebody. I don't know if it was pros or we didn't play in a bowl game my senior year.
Right.
I played in 3 or 4 after season games.
Right.
Played in 2. Well, and that third one was later in the summer, and that was in upstate New York,
Okay.
Buffalo.
And
I
then
think they did away, Mark, with that college all-star game.
long
I
time
think
ago.
Pittsburgh was the champion. Randy White caused a big fight. He was just coming out of Maryland. They played the Steelers. He sacked Bradshaw too hard. The players got after Randy White. And I think that was the last year they had the college all-star game.
That's probably true. But Randy was able to throw them around back then.
Yeah.
He was good.
Yeah, he sure was.
Yeah. I think that was.
John, can you elaborate a little on this picture here, or Don Meredith? And he was talking about easy. It was the day before the game. Can you talk about that? You remember taking that picture?
I remember we were getting out of the bus to go to Lambeau Field, play the game, and they were standing down there, and he was saying, "Easy money,
Yeah.
easy money. This is gonna be easy money." And I think he was trying to instill some confidence in Bob Hayes, who, as you know, went through the game with his hands in his pants because he was freezing. His hands were numb. And anyway, Don, he always made light of everything. If it was bad, and he made it feel good. So,
Right.
Don.
I mean, there was quite a few guys who got frostbite in that game, right?
Yeah, we had about 4 or 5, And I always wondered, I've got a spot on my finger, but I've always wondered if that was caused by that. Because I don't remember, but there were two or three of the guys, and I'm not sure which one. Jethro was one of them, I'm not sure. And they had to have a little bit of skin taken off their hands, when they were on their knuckles. And I'm not sure who else, but there were two or three, and then there were about 5 or 6 guys that did have frostbite, but they didn't have to be any, and it wasn't like taking off a lot of meat or anything. It was just taking the layer off so they would heal quicker.
Right. I think I heard a story that Jethro Kill actually had to go to the hospital after the game because he had that frostbite was so bad.
Yeah, I think that's right. I know Jethro had it the worst. I'm pretty sure. What we weren't together much after the game, right? Immediately, but I did hear that about Jethro, and
Right.
then 2 or 3 other. No, there were 2 other players that went to the doctor and had to get a little skin removed.
Bob, looking back at it now, when you played the Packers the second time, was the team more confident that you could go up, even though you played in 66 at home in the Cotton Bowl, even though you were visiting in 67, were you more confident that you were better equipped to beat the Packers? Forget about the weather, just regular, normal conditions. Was the team's psyche better in 67 than it was in 66?
Yeah, it was a lot better prior to the game than it was in 66, because in 66 we almost beat them. Robinson knocked the ball out of Meredith's hand as he was throwing. We were on the goal line, and we score, we would probably win. And so we had played them a very good game the year before, and we had not yet heard about the weather conditions. So, we were really prepared. I mean, really prepared. We worked really hard, and we had very few mistakes in practice. And so, anyway, we got up there on Friday, and Saturday we went out to Lambeau Field and worked out. I mean, we always had about a 30-minute run through of plays and just getting used to the field and the stand and the whole bit. And it was 18 degrees, and they had that copper tubing underneath the field, and it was pumping warm air. And it kept the grass was green. It was a little bit, so they had watered a little bit. It was a little bit soft, but it was just right to fall on. And anyway, we thought this is really going to be great. I mean, that 18 degrees with no wind in there didn't bother us a bit. And so anyway, the next morning, that's when George Andrew, my roommate, got up, and he got up real early to go to mass. He came back and came in, and I was showered and ready to go eat. And George said, wait a minute. He went in and got a glass of water and poured it on the window. It wasn't double pane, I don't think, back then. But anyway, the water froze. Most of it froze before it hit the bottom, before it hit the windowsill. He said it's already what did he say it was? It's already near zero, and it's supposed to get down to 18 or something below zero. And I think it did. I think it got there pretty quick, too. But anyway, we had never been out there in anything like it because the wind was blowing. I think they said the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour. And the only good thing I remember about that whole deal was when we left, we got up above all that and we could see the twilight. And it was real pretty. And I said, we're getting out of here alive.
Yeah. I read an article recently because yesterday was the 57. What was it? 67. So it was the anniversary of the game yesterday. It was New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And I was reading an article on Chuck Mercine, who actually had like half of the yards in the final drive. He had 34 yards of the 68 yards that they went. And he played, believe it or not, he came to Waterbury, Connecticut, where I live. and he was playing on a farm team or a semi-pro team for Scranton, Pennsylvania, and this was in October, right? And they called him up. Vince Lombardi called him up. He was playing semi-pro football just a couple months before that game, and he was saying that they ran with a little over a minute left. They ran a trap play.
Well, Jerry Kramer told me exactly it was 13 seconds.
No. I'm talking about before the sneak on the drive. They ran a trap play with you where you vacated, you followed the guard, and they ran Mercine in behind. He picked up 8 yards. Do you remember that play or no?
Well, I remember. I don't remember that one. I remember one where he blocked me, and I was chasing the sweep. But anyway, that could have been the same play because that's about the only time I missed my guy.
Yeah, they said you were so quick. You were so intelligent and so fast. They figured if they ran this play a couple times, they'd kind of sucker you into going that way, and they'd get in behind you. You know.
Well, the play, they were 2 yards, I think, from the goal line, and they were running a quarterback sneak. I mean, they weren't going to run a quarterback. They were supposed to hand off to Chuck Mercine.
Yep.
Lord Starr himself told me this at the Hall of Fame. And he said, but I decided Jethro was always raised up on a short yardage. Now, Jethro was a great player, but he was an inch taller than me. And he had his longer arms, and he couldn't actually get down as low as I could. So it was not his fault. It was just his physical shape. And so they double teamed him, and then I got under my guy and probably maybe could have stopped Bart, but Chuck Mercine hit Bart in the rear. I don't know if you knew that. And kind of knocked the momentum, it changed the momentum and knocked him on across. And so anyway, there was talk about, saying something about that. And Coach Sanders said, we got beat, we're getting out of here.
Yeah, he moved a little. He admits to it now, even or he did admit to it. I saw him in an interview. Jerry Kramer actually, in today's game, they catch everything. They would have caught it. He actually moved a fraction of a second a little early. He got a little jump on him. Yes, he did.
Yeah, he did. He got a little jump. And Jerry, I was talking with Jerry. Jerry, 2 years ago at the Hall of Fame, and he was talking about that play. We were talking, going back through time and talking about different plays and different things. He didn't really say anything. I told him, I said, I think that you maybe jumped off a little quick. And he said, well, nobody saw me, I don't think. Or, I don't know. He's really funny. And he said, Jethro always had a tendency when the play started, he had to look up. And when he looked up, he was a little bit higher than everybody else. And so he said, I got under him, and he might have got a little head start, but still, the play worked. Mark Starr changed the play that he and Lombardi had called, but Chuck Mercine did. That was probably one of the most significant things that Lombardi did for that game. And I don't know if it was just for that game, but to have Chuck Mercine out there, because Chuck was heavy, pretty heavy set, low to the ground, and just perfect for being a mutter or a guy that could move somebody. And he did. He made a big difference. When some of their end runs he made the crucial blocks. And, and really it wasn't the conditions were not real suitable for end runs because everybody was sliding down, including the guards and the defensive linemen and everybody else.
Bob, can you tell us a little about your relationship with Ernie Stautner, the defensive coach, and also your roommate, George Andre?
Well, of course, George was my roommate. George came my second year, and Marquette, he went to Marquette College, University, and they had quit football his senior year. So he was a draft pick because he had some pretty good film his junior year and sophomore year. So anyway, George came to the Cowboys as a rookie, and I was a second year man, and they put us together. They put George in there with me, and George was playing defensive end right beside me, and he was a really great guy. He's passed now, and I saw him in Chicago at a card show we had, I guess 2 or 3 years ago, and he was barely getting along. He told me, he said, well, I thought I'd try this again and see if I could do it, but he said, I can't do it. And it was probably no more than a year later he passed away. But anyway, George was tough cookie. And the year before he knocked Unitas out of the game, which was the worst thing that happened. I mean, for a number of reasons. I think John was hurt a little bit anyway, but John was a good guy, and George didn't intend to do that, and we never do when we hit somebody that hard. But we played on a real good field that year, and George he dwelt on that. He didn't ever hit. I don't think he ever tried to hit a quarterback hard again. Errol Morrow came in, did a great job, but George was he was a good guy. He was hard practice player, tough. He broke his elbow and the bone had a piece of bone that big in his elbow and played the whole year, played half a year with that. He took it out. He said, I wish they left the damn thing in. He said, it felt better when it was in there. So anyway, played with a tore up knee. And, George was in quite a few Pro Bowls. And George had a lot of sacks. He was a great football player. In my opinion, I think he should probably be in the Ring of Honor, and even maybe more. He was a great defensive end. And then you wanted to know about him and
Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie. Well, Ernie and George were similar.
Right.
Ernie came out. He went from Boston College. He drafted, and he went to the Marine Corps. I think he joined the Marine Corps actually, but I think the Army might have drafted him. He told us a story one time after practice, and he hit all the islands when they were going through the islands around Japan, and they were, he was telling us stories about seeing an American person skinned alive, and he said, boy, we had no pity. He said that we found mounds of dirt and we didn't do it, and there'd be a bunch of dead Americans in there. And so anyway, I think that probably affected Ernie a little bit as far as his, toughness. And I never will forget, we were in training camp in Thousand Oaks, and we had quite a few rookie linemen that particular year. And that was like probably 3 or 4 years after he came to the Cowboys, maybe 5 years. And he was showing them how to hit the sled. He was on a 2-man sled that had pads, about so wide on each side. And you pushed it around. You hit it with your forearm, and then you pushed it around. So he had George, I think, was the guy that he put on the sled. And so he went up there and he fired out and he hit that sled. I'm telling you, he hit it. It's a wonder he didn't break that spring. But the spring was a piece of steel about that thick, about 3/8 of an inch thick, that held his pad up. And Ernie hit it so hard that he hit his knuckle his knuckle went through the padding, and his knuckle was puffed up about like that. And he just said a kind of a bad word, and he just got out of the stance and hit it again, and the bone stuck up. The bone was sticking out. He said, trainer, I need some help. So they took him to the hospital. The next morning I saw him at practice, and they had him elevated like this. And I said, Ernie, does it hurt? And I said, does it throb? He said, you're damn right it throbs. And he said, I don't care. And I thought, we better be good. We better do what he says. But anyway, he was the nicest guy in the world. He just was tough. And Randy's sort of like Ernie. I mean, he's the nicest guy in the world, and he's a dear friend. But I remember Randy. I mean, when he gets mad, and he got like Ernie. He'd probably knock somebody's teeth out if they said something. But I've never seen him have any fights or anything. But on football, I've seen him hit some people pretty good, and we get along well. I think he and Ernie really. When I was talking to Ernie, they were trying to put him at middle linebacker. They thought about defensive end. Then they were going to put him in Leroy's position and let him learn under Leroy, and then start him there. But I think it takes a person it's kind of like quarterback, someone who has played that position for a long time. I mean, the middle linebacker is kind of like a quarterback. He looks over there and sees, and he's got this in his brain, and it's kind of like a defensive tackle. I'm kind of right in front of one guy, but I can tell the little things. Like I knew when they were going to zone block me. I knew when they were going to pull left. I knew when they were going to pull right because of the way they lined up. They don't have pressure on their fingernails. They're going to do something different. They're going to pass block if they're evenly between the tackle and the center, and they're off the ball just a little bit, and they have no pressure. That's generally a passing down, or it's going to be a pass. And if they're close to the center and they're back off a little bit, they're going to pull left. So I'm looking at the fullback. And that was my first saying. So he pulled that way, I'd look that way. If the tackle they tried to cut me off a lot, but I'd just jump over them. And if he were over closer to the tackle and they both had their fingernails were red, they were going to double team me, and they were probably going to trap George, the defensive end, and the fullback would go through and get Leroy, and then they would run the running back. He'd make a decision whether it's going to be off tackle or around the end or whatever. Well, anyway, those are things you learn. And so a defensive a defensive middle linebacker, he learns. Leroy started playing that in high school, and you learn those little things that you don't even think about, that they just come naturally. And so you can tell, I mean, the way they line up. If they line up this way, I mean, you know that we're going to do this, or they're going to do that. So he would call our names out if he figured they were going to run our way. He would say Buzz to Jethro. We called him Buzzer because he had a little deal on his neck. And then George, what do we call George? We had a name for him. Anyway, but George was, anyway, I can't remember what his nickname was, but he would say George, and I told George they're going to run right at him. And he didn't know if he was going to get trapped or what, but he could just tell the way they were lined up. And he would say Bob. And I generally knew when they were going to run at me, but I was happy he was doing that. So that's what Leroy could do. And he could turn around and tell the secondary if he thought it was going to be a pass. And he had signals for like short pass or long pass, and just the way they were lined up. And he's just like a quarterback on defense. So good linebackers have to be that way. And that's what good players have to do. They have to do the same thing. And then generally, I mean, you get a guy that comes out of college, and we have one with Cowboys, Parsons, and he's played under Barry Bryant, and he knows football pretty well. But he is, there are times when he has really sailed down the line, and they were really important. he would get hurt because you can't just, sometimes you guess at something, and with another year or two, he will have enough experience that he won't be getting hurt so much, in my opinion.
Right.
But he's a great football player.
He's got a good motor. He's got a very good motor, Parsons. He's,
Oh yeah.
I wish they had a little more of the support. They got a lot of guys were hurt this year, but
Yeah. Well, he's gonna be a great one. He and Randy are a lot alike as far as their motor. I mean, he's fast. Randy was fast. They're both strong. He makes plays. Randy, they made a lot of plays. I mean, I thought those two were both great. And there have been a lot of other good football players, but you have great ones, and you have, we didn't have a lot of average ones. We had mostly good football players or better. And, those two they stand out.
Bob, speaking of good football players, he passed away this year. Talk a little about Dwayne Thomas. I saw him at Tom Landry Day. I flew down for that event when they had that big ceremony for Tom Landry after he was let go. And Landry himself didn't even know if Dwayne Thomas, there was a whole bunch of you guys up on a stage there, about 100 players actually. And he says, he started talking about, he called me, we won the Super Bowl. He says, Coach Landry says, and Dwayne Thomas, he called me the plastic man. And then Landry says he was probably right. He had a pretty good sense of humor, Tom Landry. And he says that Dwayne Thomas here today, and he gets up and he's pumping his fist, Dwayne Thomas. And he says, we're good friends today. He says, but talk about Dwayne Thomas, because I thought it was a travesty the way it just all ended it was terrible. The guy was a tremendous player.
Yeah, he was. I watched some of his film. He played out at West Texas State, which is out near Amarillo, and it was a small school. And he had a coach named Joe Kerbel who coached the high school team not far from where I lived, and he was brutal. That coach was brutal. I'm telling you, Lombardi was a marshmallow compared to this guy. I went over our coach took us over to watch one of their practices in the spring. They were in class 3A. Back then we only had 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A, and B. B was for small towns. I was in class A. But anyway, in Breckenridge, it was 3A. And they had, they put us right on the 50-yard line, about 10 rows or 10 or 12 rows up in the stadium. And right down in front of us, they had, you've seen those barbed wire,
right,
deals that the Army and Marines have to crawl through. And if they raise up, it cuts them.
Yeah.
They had one of those. It was a little bit higher and a little bit wider. And so they would get, the offensive guy would be on this side and the defensive guy on this side, and they would be blocking, and one of them was trying to get rid of the blocker and one of them was trying to block. And if the barbed wire wasn't on the side, but it was on the top. But if they raised up the guy, they got cut. And when I saw that, I thought that our coach was mean. I said, my goodness, this was the worst I've ever seen. But he was a coach at Kerbel. Coach Kerbel was his coach, and Mercury Marcy's coach as well. But anyway, people were raving about him during his college career, and then we got him, and he had great athletic ability, kind of like Jim Brown. Right, it reminded me an awful lot of him. A little bit smaller. I think he was about 6'2", maybe, and Jim Brown was probably 6'3.5", and he probably weighed 210, or I don't know what he weighed, 210 or 212. But he was fast, good, had the same moves, very friendly. I mean, his first year, I think it was, I don't know if he was there 2 years, but anyway, he was there 1 year that we went to Super Bowl. And he did real well in the Super Bowl. And then he tried to renegotiate his contract. And that's what you were mentioning earlier. And Coach Landry had nothing to do with the contract. I'm sure he had something to do with it, but I'm sure that Tex, I never realized the Cowboys were running on a very small budget, and they weren't back then. And that's what I found out later. But they didn't raise his salary. So next year, he never spoke to anybody. Nobody.
Yeah.
And I mean, even me, and I spoke to him every time I could. I said, "Hi, Dwayne, how are you doing?" And he looked at me, but he didn't speak. And so after he left and I started running into him again, he actually kind of he made amends with me. And I'm sure he tried to do it with most of the other players. He just said, "I'm sorry." But he said, they really hurt me. And he said, "I didn't think anybody liked me." And I said, "Dwayne, we thought the world of you." I said, "You were one of the nicest young men that ever came through the Cowboy training camp." And I said, "We just couldn't understand. We didn't know much about the contract. Didn't have any idea what he was asking or what. But anyway, he said, "Well, if I had to do it all over again," he said, I would have been out there. I would have played my contract out and gone somewhere else." But he said, "I just got so mad that I couldn't stand it." And
he was great. He played 2 years. He was there against the Colts when you guys lost,
right.
Which you guys should have never lost. I thought you were a better team than the Colts. That's probably why you brought that cigar down there. Maybe you guys were pretty confident you could beat the Colts. They had a great defense, but offensively they couldn't match up what you got. Craig Morton didn't have a good game that game, but Dwayne Thomas was there, and then he was there for the Super Bowl win. Some people thought he should have got the MVP of the game, but you did a show called America's Game, and Dwayne Thomas was interviewed, you were interviewed, and Roger Staubach. And this is amazing to me. You said that there was one point in the season where they traded him away to the Patriots. This is unbelievable. And you said you didn't even know what had happened. You didn't find out until years later that he actually was on the Patriots for about a week, and then he came back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, amazing. But
Today
he went out to L.A. and I saw him out there a couple of times. And I used to go out to memorabilia shows like that. And anyway, Dwayne was at one of them, or maybe both of them, and he was doing landscape work. He was designing and putting in landscape for people with big homes and enjoying it. He said, I really think I found my calling." And I said, "Well, I think you found it in football, but you probably got drafted by the wrong team to start with. I mean, they just didn't have the money to pay you what you probably had to have and needed."
Yeah, because they drafted Calvin Hill the year before, and then they drafted Dwayne Thomas the following year. Two great. Maybe they didn't think he was as great as he was going to. He was great. I mean, he really was. I thought Calvin Hill was great too. He had a kind of propensity to get injured a little. He was kind of a reckless runner. He was bigger, I think, than Dwayne Thomas, if I remember correctly. But Dwayne Thomas was smooth. He was gliding. He could block. Yeah. He could catch out of the backfield. He could do it all.
That's right. He could. He was, like I said, he was a lot like Jim Brown. That's what he reminded me of when he came. And, we scrimmaged against him in training camp. And I thought, here's a guy that could be similar to Jim Brown. I mean, he's got the same kind of body and the same moves and the same speed and, very deceptive and good hands. And I'll never forget one time, my first time I ever played against Jim Brown was Coach Landry had been raving about how good he was because he was in the Eastern Division of the NFL. And Coach Landry was playing and coached with New York, and they were in the same conference as we ultimately ended up. And so he would tell us how great Jim Brown was all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think anybody could be that good, So I played defensive end my first year, and I was left defensive end, and I kind of knew how to, when it was going to be a run or when it was going to be a pass or whatever. But I saw my tackle blocked down and I saw the guard coming for me. And so I avoided the guard and I was standing right there about 5 yards from the sideline and Jim Brown was running right at me. And so I got down a little bit lower in my stance. I'm going to kill him. And next thing I know, he jumped right straight over me and I look back and he's going for the 70-yard touchdown. And I thought, Coach Landry was right. He sure was. He's almost Superman. I've never seen anything like it. And 2 years ago, it's over 2 years, but it was a Hall of Fame 2 years ago. My wife, Ann, and myself were sitting with Zonka and Jim Brown, and we visited for about an hour. And Jim Brown went through his whole life, and you know, he was a fine man. I mean, people don't even have any idea what a wonderful man he was. He and his wife, when he moved to California, he went out there and he got some bit parts and some Westerns. And, you know, he said, I was doing fine. I had a good retirement, pretty good retirement. And he said, what we did, and he was going back right after the Hall of Fame. They were taking in some more wayward kids. And he said, we take these wayward kids and we keep them about a year and try to retrain them.
Wow.
And I never knew, I'd heard that he was involved with young people, but, he just was a great guy. I mean, we got along. I played in many Pro Bowls with him, six Pro Bowls with him, and we always were friends.
Well, speaking of all the running backs that we were just talking about, that kind of leads me into my next question. Obviously, the game today is drastically different since you retired. The running game does not seem to be much of a factor anymore. It's mostly all passing, and they've taken everything away from the defense. It seems like the defense isn't allowed to do anything without getting a penalty. And it's all about, the short passing game. So I wanted to know how you feel about today's game compared to back when you played.
Well, I think you're right about when I played, it seemed like the game was more well-rounded and more like when it was founded as, a game of run and then pass. They had a round ball nearly back when I was a little boy. I had one. It was about that big around. And I'm thinking, I don't know how they passed this, but anyway, Sammy Ball seemed to do a pretty good job. He was the reason I probably played football because my dad was crippled in one leg. But Sam Ball, he grew up in a town 30 miles from my hometown, small town, and he went to TCU. And so Dad would take me to the games on Saturday when I was starting probably in the 5th grade. And so I got to, I didn't ever see him play in college. My dad did. But I saw TCU play, and then I've watched films on Sammy. And then I got to know Sammy at some different events we went to and he didn't really go to a lot of signings. He did go to some, but mostly it was at some charity or something like that out in West Texas. And he had a ranch. He must have bought it while he was playing with he played with the Giants. Who did he play with?
The Redskins.
The Redskins, yeah. He went to Redskin. He saved his money, evidently, and bought a ranch out in West Texas, and it had irrigated water and things like that. And I know at the end of his life, toward the last few years, he would not fly an airplane. So if you couldn't pick him up in a car and take him and have him home by 8 o'clock the next morning, he wouldn't go. So it cut out a lot of his appearances. But anyway, he came to TCU one time. We both got some kind of reward. And I got to meet him. And one of the nicest people I ever met in my life. I told him about my dad. And he said, West Texas people are hard to beat, aren't they, Bob? I said, yes, sir, they are. I said, and you certainly have a good reputation on here. And so anyway, he went to he went to Snyder, which was pretty close to his ranch, and went to a rest home when he finally had to. He was living by himself, and he went there, and I think he had him bury him on his ranch, and I don't know what happened after that, but anyway, very nice man, and I'm just glad I got to know him because he was my dad's hero.
Right.
They interviewed him on NFL Films. It looked like he might have been sitting actually at the ranch, and quite an outspoken guy. Some of the stuff they had to bleep out. So he was quite a character, it seemed like. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
No, well, when I was talking to him, I don't recall him cursing much. I know that I know the ranchers out there, and I know they can definitely do it. And so I didn't. I might not even paid any attention. I probably didn't. Good.
Talking about your dad, Bob, in this book here, you talked about him when you were young. You didn't realize about how tough he was. He was a strong guy. You said you went down to the garage one time. Talk about, you said he pulled an engine out of a truck where the hoist wasn't working. That's unbelievable. Talk about that for a minute. Do you remember that?
It was a pickup, had a V8 engine.
Yeah.
Ford pickup with a V8. His hoist had broken.
Yeah.
It actually broke. It probably, one of the chains had kind of come in two or started. So anyway, he lifted it up and the engine fell that back down, and then he saw what happened. And so anyway, he had to get it done. So I was there with him, and he said, I got to unbolt this right quick. And he said, I think I can do this. So he took the fans, let's see, flathead V8 engine. So he took the two flatheads off, undid the motor, bent over with his bad leg and picked the thing up and carried it over and set it down right outside the door on concrete.
That will conclude part 2 of our interview with Hall of Famer Bob Lilly. Join us again next week for part 3. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.